It's the Rush Utah high school sports every day. Here we go. This interview is brought to you by Appliance Wholesalers Plus. Trust the boys that sell GE and Samsung at AWP. They've been supporting Region 9 athletes for over 25 years at AWP. Welcome back. It's the Rush. Thanks for being with us. Thrilled to have Taylor Berg on, the head of scouting for prep baseball in the state of Utah. We're going to talk a bunch of top prospects and maybe a little bit about the playoffs that are underway in a few of the classifications. Thanks for being here, Taylor.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Andy. Appreciate it.
Let's start in 6A. The kid I don't know a lot about, but you do. Jake Welch, who plays for the Lehi Pioneers. I know you've seen him play and have done evaluations of him. What stands out about Jake, Taylor?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, he's a sophomore. At Lehi, plays for Coach Madsen. A longtime Utah Valley coach.
Yeah.
So he's in one of the better programs around, especially in the 6A class, one of the tougher regions. He's a shortstop, right-handed pitcher. He just has all the tools. As we use that term a lot in baseball, right? Tools.
Yeah.
What do they have, right? You've got the five. You've got the defense. Arm, bat, power. Running, all that. He really checks a lot of those boxes. And I think for me, the coolest thing is, last year I took over this role at the playoffs time, end of May, and I got a chance to see Lehi a little bit. And he really was kind of a smaller kid. Was asked to bunt, just kind of do some things. Role player, didn't have a huge role for that team. And then this year, he started off in the leadoff spot. He's hitting over 500. He's 6 homers, 40 hits.
Wow.
I mean, he just does a lot of the little things, right? He's very, very good character off the field, on the field. When they ask him to come in and pitch, usually late in games, he's running up to 94 on the mound as just a sophomore. He's got electric arm talent, really good feet, really good hands. Can probably, I could see him playing shortstop. Moving up the levels. Sometimes kids get moved around as they move up, but I could see him being, at a Power 5 school playing shortstop. For long term. He's just good build, 5'10", 5'11", 170 pounds, runs well, throws well. Very unselfish type player. Doesn't have a lot of strikeouts. He only struck out 8 times so far in 100 plate appearances. And that's against really good arms. Being treated as a dangerous bat, right? So
Yeah.
You can tell teams are at this point in the year trying to be careful at times with him. Try not to miss over the plate. He's kind of earned that respect as just a sophomore from his peers. I think that's really when you start to notice, who's really the team, who's really some of those players that teams are fearing and don't want them to beat them by how they treat them, how they pitch to them, or if they do pitch to them, little things like that. And Jake's just taken off. His arc has been on a steady increase for the last 12 months. His name's really starting to circle on the national radar. And I think the sky's the limit. He's been a really good player, really productive, and could, if he continues on this trend, start to get some draft talk as he gets to a senior year.
In general, Taylor, in your experience, when does it become the point in a kid's career where he's got all those tools, where people are looking at him as a position player versus a pitcher? When does that typically happen?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, I think it's different for everybody, right? And Shohei Ohtani has really changed. His success at the highest level has changed how it really trickled all the way down. Right now, two-way players, nothing new for high school, right? Especially in a smaller state like Utah. I mean, obviously, a lot of our best players do both, right? A lot of players we talk about today are two-way guys. So I think it kind of varies, right? I think the higher levels, the college coaches and pro scouts, really, it's just easier to get up there to those levels as a pitcher, right? You're not asked to do quite as much as a hitter, right? So I think sometimes what happens is if they move really well, like their mechanics are sound, they throw, obviously they throw hard. They have some metrics that are enticing to the upper levels. Sometimes they just kind of push you that way. Not necessarily that kids want to choose it, just because it's so valuable, right?
Yeah.
You need so many arms on a team to be competitive, right? And so it's just a lot harder and a lot more subjective, I think, with the hitting, right? A lot of it's who you're hitting off, because you're reacting to a pitcher, right? Whereas pitching, you're the one dictating the pace.
Yeah.
So I just think sometimes it's a little easier for kids who have that high-end arm talent to maybe transition to pitching and become high-level pitchers. But I think it's case by case. For him, I think the pitching is more of an intriguing thing for scouts. I don't think that's what he's going to be recruited as. He's such a great hitter, an unbelievable defender. But if you were to tell me, if he eventually made it all the way to the highest level, it's on the mound. There's a lot of guys who have
Yeah.
done that. The big
Yeah.
league. Kenley Jansen, someone that comes to mind, who was drafted as a catcher and ends up being an awesome
Yeah.
closer,
Yeah.
right? So maybe it could be that arc, but he's just such too good a hitter, too good a player at this point for anyone to try to push him that way. But it's just another tool in the bag, right? Like comes
Love
in
it.
from shortstop, goes right to that mound, and he's in 20, 12 innings, he's got 24 punch outs, 2 walks, right? And so it's just electric stuff. It's tough. Just a gamer. He really does whatever you ask him to do. So I think he's gonna be successful, whatever route he ends up taking.
All right, awesome. That's Jake Welch, Lehi Pioneers. Let's go to 5A. We're doing Jeremiah Hall Taylor from Maple
Yeah.
Mountain.
Yeah, electric. I mean, that's what comes to mind with him. If you haven't seen him play, he's as advertised and maybe even better. He's 6'2", 200 pounds, runs a 6'6" in the 60. I know that's a little different than other sports, right? But electric out of the box, really good, quick first step, explosive. He plays shortstop as well too, really sound defender, but man, he rakes too. He rakes, but he's another one. He's got probably the most two-way upside in the state. Like he's a pitcher. He didn't start the year. They kind of eased him into it. He's only got 12 innings up to this point, but again, another kid with 20 strikeouts. People are hitting 071, in those innings that he's pitched. And you know what? I came out and I've seen him throw all of his outings except yesterday, and his first outing of the year, he's sitting 93. Right? And we're talking about another sophomore. 91 to 94. The ball jumps out of his hand. It's fairly easy. I hate to throw that word around, but it's not a max effort move, right? It doesn't look like he's giving you everything he's got, which just means it looks like there's more, and I think that's as he gets older and continues to develop, it's going to be really hard to find a better player overall with the talent and the upside that he has.
Is that a common trait, Taylor, when you're looking at a kid who forecasts really well at the next level and beyond? And I know scouts have different things that every scout might have something that they look at a little bit differently, but in your mind, that effortlessness that a lot of these kids seem to have, even at a young age, is that something that you look at as like, oh, this is a good sign that it looks this easy, this young?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, mechanics are obviously adjustable as you get older, but there is, some naturalness to the way people move, right? And the older you get, the harder it is to, change routine, as we
Yeah.
know, just in
Yeah.
general, right? So I think when kids, move with a relative ease, and it's obviously in a way that's conducive to, future power or future velocity or whatever it might be, it's a very attractive quality in a young player, right? Because if it's easy now, in theory, as they mature physically, get stronger and bigger, and then maybe get to a college, program, weight room, all those things, then in theory, right, it'll continue to get better, right? And so
Yeah.
sometimes if you're a little too max effort young, it can be somewhat of a turnoff. It's not that it's the biggest red flag out there, but it's because that is a big part of what we do is project, right? And when you're 16, we're trying to project, hey,
Yeah.
is 94, which is incredible for your age now, are you done? Or is there a future 98, 99 in there potentially, right? And so I think that for him, I could absolutely see, upper 90s fastball in his career. And I wouldn't be shocked if he, by the time he was a senior, was up there, at least touching it, and even not sitting up there. But, he's just got that kind of talent and that kind of ease in which he delivers. He's got the body. He's been one of the top players, in his age group for the last few years. And he's another one like Welch that is really exploded on a national level. And both those two are helping bring some eyes to Utah with
Yeah.
some of that high-end talent, right? And it kind of really benefits everybody, right? So the better players we have representing us, then the more attention we all get, which has been cool to see.
This segment is brought to you by Nets on Fire, the premier basketball facility in all of southern Utah for tournaments, camp schedules, leadership trainings. Go to netsonfire.org. All right, awesome. Let's go to a kid that we've talked a little bit about on my show. I think he's still got one of the top OPSs in the whole state. That's Cooper Hawks from Timpanogos, Taylor.
Yeah, Cooper's on an unbelievable senior season right now, right? I mean, he's out of the leadoff spot. He's got 42 RBI, which is pretty much unheard of, right? And he just sets the table, sets the tone. If you watch him play, you can just see the confidence oozing out of him, right? He goes in there and expects success. The numbers are ridiculous, right? I mean, like you said, the OPS, he's hitting 526 on the year. I think they're a dangerous threat in the playoffs for sure, and he's absolutely at the heart of it, right? I think Coach Nelson has been around a long time. He knows ball, and I think he's like, look, this is the best hitter I have, and we're going to put him right at the top of the lineup, and he's going to set the tone. And he's often doing it with extra base hits, and those they're so well coached. I mean, they constantly get guys on base throughout the lineup, right? So I think that's why he has 42 RBIs. Those 7, 8, 9 guys are
Yeah.
on base, right? And
Yeah.
so they'll do whatever they can to get to the next guy mentality, right? And they're just so well coached and well rounded, disciplined team that they just continue to put him on opportunities to be successful. And he's just got such a good pedigree of baseball. His older brother played, still playing, that he just kind of got a knack for barrel, and he loves the moment.
All right, that's Cooper Hawks from Timpanogos. We're going to 3A now, Taylor, a kid that I've heard his name a ton. I haven't seen him a lot. That's Jordan Fawson from Grantsville. What can you tell us about him?
Yeah, Jordan Fawson. Yeah, so Grantsville's 20 wins this year, which is awesome. And our new head coach, he was at Hillcrest last year. They're doing a great job. They're very senior heavy. Kind of like you. I haven't had a chance to see a ton of him in person. I've seen a little bit. From what I've seen, it's good. He's another leadoff hitter that's having an unreal year. He's setting the table. He's got 29 stolen bags. 37 hits. 100 plate appearances. But like we were talking about earlier, he's also, I think, their ace pitcher. Right? He's leading the team in their innings. He's 6-0 record, a 2.9 ERA. Like, he's really doing everything for Grantsville and the Cowboys this year, and they look like I shouldn't say early, they look like a 3A title favorite at this point. And
Yeah.
they've got a deep pitching staff. They've got a bunch of seniors ready to step in, and some good young guys. So I really like what I've seen from him and the little I have, and I look forward to watching those 3A playoffs here in the next week, so I get a little closer look. But he's had an unbelievable year, and I've got to be a reason there.
Yeah.
Those favorites for 3A, right? Big catalyst at the top of the
Yeah.
lineup, on the mound, someone they lean on.
Awesome. That's Jordan Fawson. Let's go to 2A. Beaver having a great year. Rader Bloomquist, who's another guy who's at the top of a lot of these stat categories. They got a great team this year, and he's obviously been a big part of that.
Yeah, Beaver's awesome, man. I mean, like I said, I took over in June. I knew a few of the kids, attended a couple of my events. So fortunately, I've seen a few of those kids down in Beaver, and it's been awesome, man. They're really talented. A few of those teams at the top of 2A all have
Yeah.
next level players. I think Rader and his cousin, I believe it's his cousin, Ty over there, the Cayennes alone. They have a few guys
Yeah.
that can really play. He's kind of the ultimate Swiss Army knife, right? Like, he's one of the few kids, I think, that can legitimately play all 9 positions on the field, right? And he can catch, he'll pitch, he'll play center. I don't, the infield is something he could do if you asked him to, or how much they ask him to do it, but he'll do whatever you need, right? He's strong, kind of that country strong a little bit, right? And he's confident. He expects to dominate, right? And that's such a strong character quality, I think, in baseball, right? There's so much failure built into the game that if you can find ways to expect success and just go up there like it's going to happen, almost manifest it, right? It does happen for you a lot. And I
Yeah.
think for Rader, it's just been an awesome season. He's doing it both sides of the ball, right? He pitches too, 43 strikeouts, 22 innings. Like, he's got good stuff. He'll run the fastball, the mid up 80s. So I really like Rader. I think he's got a bright future. One of those kids. We'll see which position he ends up settling into the next level, but I have no doubt that someone will pick him up and he'll be a great addition.
That's a fun semifinal in 2A, man, with
Yeah.
Beaver and Gunnison, with Waylon Sorensen and Pickett on the mound. I saw that Waylon was named your pitcher of the week for Prep Baseball Utah with what he did in 7 innings the first weekend of the tournament. Kanab with the Veroscos and those guys. So I'm really looking forward to the semifinal in 2A. One thing I'd be interested in your perspective on, Taylor, is multi-sport athletes in this day and age, for kids that are wanting to play baseball as their primary sport and get to college or even further. What is your perspective on kids that want to play football or even basketball? It's rare that there's a kid doing all three, like a Garrick Orchard over at Provo. That's becoming less and less. But what's your perspective, and what do you tell kids who want to do that with their primary sport being baseball?
Yeah, no, it's a good question. I think, man, opinions on that very differ,
Sure.
and so I think for me, I was a 3 sport athlete in high school. I definitely believe there's some upside to it. Now, there's some downside to it. Now, I think the problem people run into is if you're going to play the multiple sports, you can't completely abolish, your other sport altogether. What I mean by that is, if you're going to play football, you can't put the bat down for 4 months,
Right.
right? And,
Right.
you can't never interact with your baseball guys, or things to that effect, right? Basketball and wrestling a little different because they're so much closer to the baseball season. I coached for 6 years at Juan Diego. We had
Yeah.
basketball players, and we've sent guys to Division I baseball that were multi-sport guys. So I've seen it both ways. I think the problem lies with if you're going to do the multiple sport thing in 2026, there are resources like prep baseball for you to be able to still get yourself out there.
Yeah.
And if you're a football guy, come to one of our events in June or July, so you have something, in the last few months that people can reference. And I think that just helps keep you in the loop. I think Utah, we get very much overshadowed as it is. These mountains kind of keep us hidden from the national radar. So if you are a multi-sport guy, we just got to work a little harder to make sure we kind of stay relevant, for lack of a better term, right? Like you don't want to disappear for 6 months and then just show up and go, hey, why is no one recruiting me?
Yeah.
Right. I think you brought up Garrick. I was fortunate to coach Garrick for a few years in the club scene, and we always tried to get him to play whenever he could, right? And it's different because he was the quarterback.
Yeah.
Really tough when you're that, right? The football team needs him
Yeah.
there to do anything. So, but we would have him come play some tournaments when we could, push him when we could, and that really helped him to still be able to play 3 sports, have an amazing experience, but still get some recruitment. I know he hasn't committed to this point, but it's not that people don't know that he's around and a good player, right? He's kind of kept himself in that light just enough to still, be on those lists and get those mentions and those calls. So I'm sure he'll make a decision soon, but I absolutely love the different things different dynamics you can learn, different skills. You work on your body differently in all sports. So I'm absolutely an advocate for it. I just think if you're really serious about one sport or the other, you still got to try to, if you're a football guy and baseball is your dream, you got to still kind of budget in some time and some priority to the baseball journey, throughout. Don't just let it fall by the wayside. Make baseball your priority, or excuse me, football your priority in fall, right? But pick some BP every now and then, play a little catch or, things of that nature.
Really appreciate that answer. And then we'll do a little speed round here, Taylor.
Sure.
Let's start with 4A. Who do you think is the biggest threat to knock off the #1 seed, which is Snow Canyon this year? And I know it's super competitive. There's a million good teams, but what do you think about that bracket?
Yeah, I mean, so I kind of took the approach to this question as I was looking at the bracket, right? So in that top half of the bracket, assuming Snow Canyon moves on this to the tournament, they'll face either someone from Provo or Cedar, Skyview, Ridgeline, So I kind of looked at it like that as far as who might knock them off. I think Provo and Ridgeline potentially could do it, right? I think the you got to have pitching, right? We talked about one of the pitchers for Provo, Garrett Orchard. I mean, he can beat anybody on any given day, right? Wilco Branson has a shot. It just kind of depends on when you see people too, right? I think that's what makes the tournament so exciting is when do you see somebody, which arm might you get, or which arm do you not have, or are you in the loser's bracket and got to play out of it? I think there's a lot of dynamics at play, but Ridgeline's a really scary team up north. They're very deep. They're one of those teams that kind of like Snow Canyon where they've got youth teams and then they kind of feed the high school, and those guys have been playing together for a really long time. So even when they're down, in a game, like you don't feel like they're out, right? So I think Ridgeline's got a lot of that. Provo, obviously those schools that they play down that Region 9, Crimson Cliffs is, they have to be up there, right? As someone who could do it.
Sure.
They've been playing well as of late. They've got the history. They've got the coaching pedigree, right? They've won a few titles. Desert Hills is dangerous. I think they're as dangerous an offensive team as you're going to find. So on any given day, they could, really light up the scoreboard that way. So I think all the teams have a good shot. It just kind of comes down to, who plays who when. But, I think if you, Ridgeline, Provo got a shot to get them knocked Snow Canyon into that losers bracket, assuming they come out of it. But I'm really interested to see because it feels more wide open, than it has, I guess, previously. I was in the 4A class the last few years, and this year feels like it could go a number of ways. There's probably 5 to 8 teams that could really do it.
Awesome. And then in regards to the 3A tournament, who do you think has the deepest pitching staff? You just talked about the pitching and who's going to pitch when, and sometimes if you're in the win backs, you're pitching 8th graders by the time, So who in 3A's pitching staff are you most impressed by?
Yeah, absolutely. So, funny you say that. So we used to be in 3A when we were Juan Diego, and we won in 2022. We didn't go to the losers bracket, and that was awesome. I got to just plan on my pitching. It was great. My best pitcher pitched in the championship, and it was awesome. But the next year, we lost one of those pod games and had to battle our way out. And to your point, there's guys throwing with either 0 varsity innings or a couple. And I think keeping that all in mind, I think Grantsville is probably where I'll lean. Right? I think it's hard to win 20 games. but they also have 4 guys with over 20 innings pitched. Right. So I think they've done a good job of developing and giving guys opportunities. They have, probably 8 guys that have thrown some considerable innings with 4 of them over 20. So I think that's going to really serve them well, especially if they happen to lose a game and get down to the losers bracket, because you got to have depth, or you got to have guys who can at least get in there and feel comfortable, throwing innings. Whether it's dominant or not is kind of irrelevant. You just need guys who are comfortable, ready for the moment, will throw strikes, let your defense play for you. So I think Grantsville I'd probably give the edge to, but Union's really sneaky. They had a couple high-end arms, and then North St. Pete's got probably 2 of the top arms as far as just individual players, right? So again, kind of depends on when you see them. They've got a couple left-handers that'll play some next-level ball, and Grantsville's probably got the overall product, but man, there's some sneaky arms in there. I think 3A seems to be anybody's ball game every year. Like last year and the year before, we're all over the place in the playoffs, right? So I kind of expect another good tournament this year in that level.
Okay, cool. Then last one, Taylor. What are you most looking forward to just in general with the rest of the 2A tourney?
Yeah, honestly, I'm just really looking forward to watching. I think the hardest part, is they're so spread out. We are spread out as a state, right, from Logan to St. George, but a lot of our 2A schools start to go east and west off the 15 freeway, right? So it's hard to get out there and watch those regular season matchups. So like you alluded to the Beaver Kanab matchup. Like I'll be there tomorrow night, BYU at 7. Like I'm just really looking forward to watching just all of it, right? I don't get to see them that much, but I think for me, the Beaver Kanab game will be awesome. Gunnison, San Juan, a lot of those teams I just haven't seen a lot of, and I'm excited to just really get out and watch them, and because they deserve representation too. They've got some good players, and they've done a lot of good things in the years past. So I think for me, just all of it in general, which probably is not the answer you're looking for, but it's exciting to be able to cover all the sport and a chance to put it on an awesome venue on the biggest stage is for me. And I'm in Utah County, so I'll be at a lot of those games. I'll be at a chance to see, and I think it'll be fun for people to see what kind of talent is at the 2A level.
Awesome. That's Taylor Berg, everybody. You know him if you're in the baseball world. Hardest working man in Utah baseball, director of scouting for Prep Baseball Utah. And the reputation, down here, I was talking to a guy down here who's big on it. He says, you got to get Taylor on your show. Your reputation is huge down here for all the work you do for these kids, getting them exposure. So I really appreciate you making time for us in the lead up to the playoffs. And hopefully we can do it again soon.
Yeah, absolutely. I appreciate your time. It was fun to be on here, and I hope we do it again, man. Appreciate it.
Thanks a lot, Taylor. Quick break. We'll be back on The Rush. Send us your highlights, Andy at therushutah.com or anywhere on social media at The Rush Utah. It's The Rush Utah, high school sports every day.